What's up, guys? You're now listening to Devo with Uncle Theo. Today is day 255, and we're going to look at Ezekiel chapters 40 through 42. Last time we left off, we looked at the Valley of Dry Bones, and we talked about chapter 37 of Ezekiel and how it was an overview of the entire book of Ezekiel, and that picture gave us exactly what would happen to Israel. And we went into the prophecy of Gog and Magog, and also that there's a connection there with the battle of Armageddon in the future. Now we move to chapter 40, and an angel has come to conduct a tour of basically all of the details shown to the prophet. And this angel is referred to as the angel of the Lord, which we've seen over and over again. And I've made the argument that this is the pre-incarnate Christ, because this angel is also referred to several times throughout scripture as the Lord, as Yahweh. And it's done here again in chapter 44, verses 2 and 5. So we've seen a survey in chapters 1 through 24 of Israel being removed from the land. We've seen the judgment against other nations in chapters 25 through 32. We've seen how Israel will literally return to the land in chapters 34 through 39. And now we're about to look at a virtual tour of the Messiah and the millennial reign and what those conditions will be like. So let's pick up here in chapter 1. In the 25th year of our exile, at the beginning of the year, on the 10th of the month, in the 14th year after the city was taken, on this same day, the hand of the Lord was upon me, and he brought me there. In the visions of God, he brought me into the land of Israel and set me on a very high mountain. And on it to the south, there was a structure like a city. So he brought me there. And behold, there was a man whose appearance was like the appearance of bronze, with the line of flex and a measuring rod in his hand. And he was standing in the gateway. The man said to me, Son of man, see with your eyes, hear with your ears, and give attention to all that I am going to show you. For you have been brought here in order to show it to you. Declare to the house of Israel all that you see. And so he goes through, and we're looking at the temple. And here's what we're going to see. We start with the wall of the temple in chapter 40, verse 5. Then we move to the east gate in verse 6. Then the portico in verse 8. Then the outer wall and pavement in verse 17. The east inner court in verse 19. The north gate in verses 20 through 22. The north inner court in verses 23. The south gate in verses 24 through 26. The south inner court in verses 27, then the gateway in verses 28 through 30, then the priest's room in verses 44 through 45, the court in verses 47, the temple portico in verses 48 through 49. Then we move into chapter 41 and we see the outer sanctuary in verses 1 through 2, the most holy place in verses 3 through 4, the temple wall in verses 5 through 7, the base in verse 8, the open area in verse 10, the west building verse 12. Then we move to chapter 42 and cover the priest's room again. And so there's been much debate. What is Ezekiel's temple? Like, what does chapters 40 through 48 depict? And this is where you get into the debate on premillennialism and amillennialism and postmillennialism and what position you take. And I want to show my hand. I don't want to be deceptive. I'm a premillennialist, but at the same time, I'm not a dogmatic, legalistic one that beats up on other positions when it comes to secondary and tertiary issues, but not primary issues like the scripture, the person and work of Christ, the nature of God, and the things of life. But I think we're moving into a place where there's less division around secondary issues. Now, you may not can be elders at the same church or form a teaching ministry together because there'll be some conflict there, but we're getting in a place where fellowship is had better. And I love this place we're in. And as we move into the next generation of leadership, I want to be one of those leaders where we can talk about these things without being divisive. And so let's do that. In chapters 40 through 48, you get elaborate detail about a temple here that's going to be rebuilt. And this is specifically for Israel in the renewed land. And we're getting specific commands of what its proper use will be and what will be done during that time. And so here's where the divide is happening. People come to these texts and they understand this vision a few different ways. And here are the main options. Okay, one, this is a picture of what will literally happen in Jerusalem in some future point in the world's history. So you can land there. Or two, it would have been a part of Israel's literal future, but they forfeited it because of disobedience. That's another. Here's number three. This will happen, but it's going to happen in the millennial kingdom on earth after Christ returns. Number four, this is all just a metaphor, which has been fulfilled in the church of Jesus Christ. We're operating in this now. Christ is reigning in the hearts of all of the believers. And this is a picture of what that looks like. And fifth, no, this is the eternal state. This will happen in the new heavens and earth. And this is the new Jerusalem that will be fulfilled then in the eternal state. Now, where do you lie amongst all of those? To be honest with you, most people don't even know. It's usually pastors and scholars debating this. And most average Christians are just innocent bystanders in a debate. But I don't want you to be ignorant of these debates. When you hear people talking about this, at least you want to know what they're talking about. And so when they're debating, it's usually books like Revelation, Isaiah, Ezekiel here in chapters 40 through 48. Daniel is going to be brought up. And obviously, Jesus mentions some things about the end times and First Thessalonians as well, where you can bring those verses in to discussion for debate as well. Just based on an overview of what I said, where do you think you land? The more literal interpretation is a better explanation. Why? Because we have a massive amount of detail because of the massive amount of detail that these chapters contain. But the problem that people have with the literal interpretation, okay, we see sacrifices here. Why are sacrifices there when Jesus was the once and all sacrifice for sin? That causes people a lot of problems. And the answer to that is that kind of necessitates a misunderstanding of the sacrifices to begin with, because they never atoned for sin. They were always a picture. If you have a right understanding of them to begin with, if they didn't do anything, they were a symbol for what is to come. When you put that symbol after the cross, it gives you even more perspective of what happened. And so the sacrifices before the cross were perspective, and the sacrifices after the cross were retrospective. Similar to communion, how we take that not to sacrifice Christ all over again, but to remember what actually happened now that we have more light and more detail. Now, the other argument is Paul describes the Church of Jesus Christ as the temple of God. But again, the amount of detail here in Ezekiel's descriptions in chapters 40 through 48 makes it hard to take that interpretation. Now, remember position 5, that this may be the eternal state of what happens in the future in the new heavens and earth. A lot of people land here because if you go to Revelation chapters 21 through 22, there are so many parallels with Ezekiel 40 through 48. So maybe this is a heavenly guide of the new earth with Jerusalem as the capital. The city is a perfect cube. It's Revelation 21:16. Just as Ezekiel temple was. So they say this explains why there's no literal temple in the new Jerusalem. And so some people think that's the best interpretation. But no matter where you land there, please, brothers and sisters, let's not fight over these things. There's so few solid biblical Christians on the earth as there is. We don't need to be divided amongst each other. We believe the same gospel. We have the same scriptures, and we need to talk through these things as best as we can. And as we come to our conclusion, not to be so dogmatic, because to be honest with you, nobody on earth theology is 100% accurate. All of our theology is going to get corrected one day when we see Jesus face to face and we're perfected. So we need to live humbly in light of that and love all of our brothers and sisters. Unless they preach a different gospel, then we must consider them anathema. You guys take care and have a good day.
Yeah.